Hello, everyone. Good morning or good evening, according to where you are around the globe. And welcome to this live stream with Gate-Away. Today, we are going to talk about how we can quicken the buying process for a property in Italy, but keeping it safe. We discussed this with a lawyer, Nick Metta. Hello, Nick. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us. Nick, would you like to introduce yourself? You got your microphone off.
Hi, Simone. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm very happy to be here today in this live stream. Yes, my name is Nick Metta, and I'm an Italian lawyer. I am the partner of Studio Legale Metta. We are an international law firm, and we focus on assisting foreigners doing business in Italy. And one of our strongest practices is real estate. So we assist people buying homes in Italy.
Okay. So, as I said, we are going to discuss how to make the buying process quicker. We know that the buying market, especially in Italy, has changed a lot lately. And after we spent this very bad period of the pandemic, 2 years, 2.5, and we hope that it's over now. After that, the market has taken a completely different pace, and we moved from a buyer market where the buyer was in power. We say in Italy, had the knife, hold the knife from the handle. You know this expression. That means that you have the power to decide whether to buy or not to buy, or to move to another property, or wait to buy a property. So we moved from a buyer market to a seller market, where now there is a strong demand in buying property in Italy. So the seller is the seller now that can decide whether to sell you the property or to sell to another one, because there is more demand and less offer. So we already know that we heard about experiences of someone wanting to buy a property and then ready to buy it, and then some other buyer stole it. Let's say stole it, bought it first, and so on. So what a buyer can do to shorten the time to buy a property, to be more ready and quicker to buy a property?
Yes, absolutely. Simone, I absolutely agree with you. This is definitely a buyer's market. And in the past, before the pandemic, the previous 15 years, I had seen only 2 cases of buyers losing a property they were negotiating. And I've seen 2 cases over the past year alone that people came to us after having lost a transaction to someone else who was quicker. So it is definitely important in this economy, in this market. It is definitely important for buyers to have some tools and some strategies to be able to place an offer more quickly than what used to be until 2 years ago, I would say. So we had adapted to this new scenario, and in order to adapt, we have been wondering what are the reasons why buyers used to hesitate before signing a purchase offer, and how can we remove those reasons. So one of the reasons, the reasons was the will to shop around and see if you can find a better deal, and see if you don't want to commit with one property, you want to shop around and see if you find other homes that you might like. The other option, the other reason that created a little bit of a longer time between the visit of the property and the signing was that there was longer negotiation. And then the final important reason that made very often a lot of time pass between the viewing and the signing was to resolve the unknown, meaning to give the buyer answers regarding key aspects of the transactions that would convince the buyer that it is a deal that it is worth pursuing, or it is safe pursuing. So the first two things, meaning shopping around and negotiations, well, simply in this market is no longer possible to the extent it was possible before, because there is less inventory, there are less properties on the market, and plus there are more bidders, more people willing to place an offer. So you need to like the property, and yes, you can still negotiate a little bit, but at the end of the day, you need to be ready to sign. So the part you can work on as a buyer is to more quickly resolve the unknown, find the answers that you need in order to make a decision and commit to the purchase and sign the purchase offer. So we have identified some key questions that right after you identify a property that you would like to visit, for example, even before visiting the property, you can ask the agent if the property is listed by an agent, because obviously you might find a property that is listed by the owner. If it is listed by the owner might not be as professionally trained to be able to give you definite answers. So to be quicker in a situation where you have to be quicker, having visiting a property that is sold by an agent might help that process, because the agent has access to the knowledge and the tools to give you the answers. Okay, so yeah,
what you're saying is to make the sale or the buying quicker, we just need to either remove all the blocks or resolve them up front before doing an offer. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
And also, of course, as you said, if you go through an estate agent, the estate agent is professionally trained to fix all the problems or to solve all the problems, whereas a direct seller might not be trained as this.
Yes, a seller, a private seller might not be able to give you the answers you're looking for, because they don't know where to start looking, because it's not their job. You know, they are perhaps private individuals, and they would have to consult someone else. So that might slow down the process.
It would take some more time.
Yes, yes. So if you have an agent, there are some key questions you can ask, even once again, before you even visit the property. One question is, for example, okay, this is the price. What are the costs to complete the purchase? And we know that in Italy, for example, a big variable is the transfer taxes, the taxes that apply to the transfer of the property. And we did a live stream in October, I think it was last year. So people can go and look at that for the details. But basically, depending on who is selling, what type of property you're buying, and other circumstances, the closing costs might change dramatically, a lot, from 1% of the purchase price to 10% of the purchase price, and sometimes even more than that. So you want to ask the agent, can you tell me what are the costs of to buy this property? And then you will know, for example, if it is a 300,000 property, you will know if there is an additional 3,000 for taxes or 30,000 for taxes.
Exactly.
And
that makes a big difference.
It's a big difference. It's definitely a big difference. So that is the first question we recommend that you ask, even before visiting the property. The second question that we recommend asking is, can you, agent or seller, tell me with certainty that the property is fully compliant, has all the building compliance in order? Because we know that, unfortunately, some property owners, when they remodel their homes, that they might take shortcuts, they might do some remodeling without proper permits, and especially if you are buying with a mortgage, and the bank might detect remodeling done without proper permits, and that will slow down the process tremendously. You want to make sure that the property is fully compliant, because as a buyer, when you buy a property that is not compliant, it becomes your problem as a buyer. So you want to ask the agent or the seller, is this property fully compliant? I need to know for certain. So you can have to this type of question, you can have three answers. One is, yes, I verified this with the seller and with the seller's technicians, engineer, and I have all the paperwork. It is fully compliant. Or I don't know, I need to ask the seller. The seller doesn't know because the seller inherited the property. So the seller has no clue. Or no, the property is not compliant and the seller knows it and the seller is going to fix it before completion, before the signing. So depending on the answer you get, you will act accordingly in your purchase offer. So if all the paperwork is in order, that's great. If the agent doesn't know, or if the seller says that there is something that needs to be fixed, in the purchase offer, you want to put a contingency. You want to say, I want to purchase under the condition that the property is fully compliant, not later than this date. And so you can sign with confidence because the signing, the purchase offer is subject to the verification that that condition is met. Okay.
If I can say something, this is quite important because it happens quite often, not because the owner of the property made changes without registering there, but also happened that the builder directly made changes during the project. So the construction is different than the project. And usually they are very easy to fix. You just go there with a new plan and the land registry and register, and it's really easily fixed, but it might be not. So some changes cannot be made compliant with the project. So you have to know that up front.
Yes.
So then if you go to the notary and that difference cannot be fixed, then it's a problem. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. That is a very, very good point, Simone. There are many situations where, as you said, for example, the case you mentioned, when there is a builder, there are changes that are decided after the project has been filed for approval, and the builder might genuinely forget to file the update to the blueprint, and that would be a problem. That would prevent the sale to go through. So how do you resolve that? If you are doing, if you're buying with a mortgage, the bank that is going to lend you the money will have a compliance check done by an appointed surveyor. And if there are some issues, if there are any issues, the seller will have to fix the issues before completion. However, as you said, Simone, sometimes there are some issues that cannot be resolved. The only way to resolve the issue is to remove that issue. For example, I've had several cases of people inheriting homes where a storage room had been converted into a bathroom, and it simply could not. There was no way to get a permit, a license to add an additional bathroom in that position of the place, of the apartment, because of structural issues, because of the lack of aeration, because of local town hall regulations. So in that case, in order to do completion, you have to remove completely the bathroom and bring back the storage room to its original purpose as a storage room. And so you want to know all of that up front. And how do you do that? So if the seller, for example, as we said, has inherited the property and doesn't know what the original owner had done to the property, well, the seller usually will ask a surveyor that he or she trusts. It can be a geometra in Italian, an architect, or an engineer, to do an inspection on the apartment or the villa, whatever it is, and issue a report, a compliance report. So if there are issues, the seller will have to take care of it. So one of the things that we recommend clients to put in the purchase offer is this purchase offer is contingent to satisfactory compliance report by a certified geometra or engineer or architect. Many real estate agents also recommend the seller to do this because otherwise the transaction can be slowed down in the best case scenario or terminated with very high penalties for the seller. Because if the seller puts a property on the market that cannot be sold because there are compliance issues, the buyer could ask for twice the deposit back. And so that would be very, very penalizing for a seller.
So what you're saying is, if you have time, you can wait to check, you can wait for the seller to check all these things up front. Or if you don't have time and you want to be quick, you can put all these conditions, all these contingencies on the formal offer to say, okay, I will buy this property as long as all these requirements are okay.
Correct. Yes, and
that will quicken, of course, that will quicken all the process.
Absolutely, absolutely. Used to be that the buyer used to do the checks before signing the purchase offer, as you are saying. But now with being a seller's market, the buyer would say, okay, I'm okay buying this property as far as I receive a report confirming that all the compliance checks are in order. And that is a contingency that the buyer puts. And so my recommendation is that there is a deadline attached to each contingency that you put in the contract. Like, I'm going to buy this property under the condition that I receive within 20 days, 30 days, whatever it is, under the circumstances, I receive a compliance report by certified expert.
Okay. We've got one question which is in line with the subject. Wouldn't the geometer find these things much earlier in the process?
If the seller involves a geometra, that's ideal. If the seller is not willing to pay for a geometra, just for people who don't know, is a certified, licensed technician who has the ability to check whether a property is compliant with building regulations. So a geometra can be hired by the seller, can be hired by a buyer, or by a bank, as we said. So if there is no bank, it would be either the seller who would have to make sure to know what he or she is selling, or if the seller says, you know what, okay, you do your checks, and then if your geometra confirms that everything is okay, I will sell you the property. Some seller will not pay for the checks. Okay. So yes, the geometra will find these things in this market after you have signed a contingent purchase offer.
So what you say, the geometra is the right figure to find it out. It depends on who pays for it, either the seller or you.
Yes, exactly. And so geometra is a professional who has a secondary school education degree. So whereas an architect or an engineer who are also licensed to do these type of checks have a university education degree. So they have also the competence to assess circumstances like structure and earthquake proof, things like that. So if depending on the type of check that you want to subject the purchase to, you might be satisfied and happy with the geometry check, or at a higher level with an architect or an engineer, which is the most comprehensive. You might want to ask an architect, for example, if one of the conditions, and here we get to another situation that happens that used to slow down the process in the past. You might be interested in, if you're buying a villa, you might be interested in putting a swimming pool in. And however, in order to find out if that area is allowed to get a permit for a swimming pool, because in Italy, landscape regulation is really tough, and there are some areas where you cannot just install a pool to preserve landscape environment and stuff like that. So in order to find out if you can install a swimming pool, or even if you want to add the bathroom or build an addition to your home that you're buying, you need someone to look at the regulation, prepare some drawings, ask the town hall, and get a permit, a preemptive permit. And in order to do all that, you need a licensed technician. And in that case, you probably may want to hire an architect, because the architect will prepare all the project and the drawings to be filed to get a permit. So in that case, it will be a purchase offer under the contingency that a building permit for whatever you want to do can be issued. So once you get the approval from the town hall, at that point, you go to completion. If you get denied, then the transaction is terminated. Does it make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So again, if you don't want to wait to see whether they give you the permission, you can put everything on the preliminary agreement or the formal offer to see.
Yes, and before the pandemic, used to be completely different. Like people used to do all these investigations before signing a purchase offer. Just sellers would just go with it because the market was so dead and so desperate. So they just went along with whatever request the buyer had, and when all the stars aligned, they finally signed a purchase offer at that point.
Okay. Before we go to another point, there is another question. Since you mentioned an apartment in a condominium, it's Brian is asking, if you are buying a condominium apartment, are there specific questions we should be posing to the agent or homeowner?
I'm so glad that they asked this question. Thank you, Brian. This is a brilliant question. So yes, definitely. There are several questions. The most important ones are, A, what are the condo dues, the monthly condo dues? And so in a condominium, obviously there are shared areas, they're shared that needs some light, some electricity, some cleaning, some maintenance. So you want to know what's the cost on the unit that you are willing to purchase, because costs are divided among all units based on several parameters like square meterage, position, and so many other things. So you want to
in Italian are called millesimi.
Millesimi, exactly. So they split the whole cost into thousands, and depending on the type of cost, there are different distribution parameters for each category of costs. So you want to ask the agent or the seller, what are the condo fees annually? The other question you want to ask, and this is really, really crucial, you want to ask, are there any improvements that have been approved by the condo association but not paid yet? Because if they have been approved but not paid yet, or if they have been done and not paid yet, you as the buyer are responsible for those costs. And the other question you want to ask is the seller current with all condo payments? Because any debt that the seller has for the previous 2 years will be also, the buyer will be liable for those debts as well. So even if this is a personal debt, there is an exception for condo dues. When you sell the property to someone else, that person who buys the property inherits the last 2 years of unpaid condo costs. Okay. So
usually they make a statement that all the condo fees have been paid and everything. But yes, especially for the restoration costs, if there is a restoration project, as you said, that has already been approved, but the seller sell it before they started the works, then of course it's a new buyer,
It's the
it's a
new
new
buyer.
owner to pay
Yes,
for that.
yes. And the final question in a condo purchase is you want to ask if the condominium is involved in any disputes, because sometimes condominiums are involved in disputes, and if the condominium loses the dispute, all the condo owners will have to pay the legal fees and the court fees to the winning party. So in proportion to the distribution parameters we mentioned earlier. So these are the four main things that we recommend. And usually notaries are pretty alert about these. When there is a condo sale, the notary will recommend that that the agent gathers from the seller a letter from the condo manager confirming these circumstances. So sometimes they only confirm, they make the condo manager confirm that the condo dues have been paid. We always recommend to include the statement, as you said, about the renovation for the entire building, and also a statement regarding not being involved in any disputes. That is our recommendation. Okay.
Okay.
So the other item that we recommend asking the agent before or after having visited the property is, have you checked the title? Is the title clean, or do we have to worry about checking the title? Now, it is true that notaries will check the title right before closing, but that usually happens really just a few days before completion happens. So our recommendation is to check the title way ahead when you have to start investing time in preparing for the transaction, because you don't want to spend 2 months on a property and then to find out that the title is not in order. So what are the things to look out when you check the title? So one of the main concern is make sure that there are no gifts in the title history of the past 20 years, meaning the property was not transferred by donation, by gift in the past 20 years. So that is something that you want to check. And if it was transferred through inheritance, then also you might want to check how that inheritance went down, what the details are. If there was a will, you want to see the will. The notary will also ask for those details. But once again, if there are issues, you don't want them to have to postpone closing after everything has been scheduled for closing. You don't want to postpone it for another month or two or even more because there are issues in the title. Usually title issues in general can be rectified. Even if there is a donation, you can get a title insurance in Italy. Sellers are usually in agreement in pay for the title insurance to protect buyers in the event of heirs who may have been excluded by some estate. And perhaps here we might want to take a step back and explain why.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to ask you, what's the problem? What might be the problem if there is something with the title or inheritance or?
Yeah. So in Italy, there is a specific provision of family law and inheritance law meant to protect certain family members when someone dies. In particular, children, spouses, and sometimes even parents have to be included or have the entitlement to claim a portion of the estate, even if they have not been mentioned in a will. So let's say someone passes and leaves a will, and this person has two children and a wife, perhaps a second wife or second husband, second marriage husband, I mean. And in that case, in the will, the deceased had left everything to the spouse and nothing to the children. If the Italian law applies to this estate, the children have entitlement to challenge the will and claim a portion of the estate. And this type of claim can be enforced also against people who might buy the property from the spouse who had inherited everything. So the scenario could be a spouse inherits everything, doesn't involve the children, sells the property. After 3 years, the children win the case in court against the spouse and can go to the buyers and say, hey, that property is actually ours or is also ours. And there is nothing a seller can do unless a seller has proper title insurance. Now, as I was saying, in most cases, sellers are aware of this weakness of their title and agree on paying the title insurance premium. And usually it's not that expensive considering the cost of a property purchase in Italy. So usually with a premium of ranging between 800 and 1200 euros, you can buy a title insurance to protect from donation claims. And if the seller is not prone to pay for that premium because there might be some other buyer who is motivated to buy without asking for that title insurance, well, you can say, okay, you don't want to pay, let me pay for it. The application needs to be signed by the seller, but you can pay for the premium, you as the buyer. So many don't know that you can do that, but you actually can, as the buyer, purchase your own title insurance with the seller's consent, obviously, because it's the seller who is selling, so there are liabilities on the seller. So that is definitely something we recommend. Check the title and make sure, and the agent will be able to tell you if the past 20 years of property transfers are all in order and accounted for. Because one other thing, Simone, you might have heard of this. There are some areas of Italy where properties are like there is a lack of record and people don't sell really the property title. People sell the possession. They say, oh, well, I have owned this property forever and for more than 30, 40 years, nobody ever claimed anything. So I'm selling you the possession. Well, that's a very weak title. And there are so many, there might be so many issues with that. So we definitely recommend that you know that is the case for the property you are buying, rather than discovering down the road and having to reverse the whole thing. Okay.
Yes, definitely. So so far we said check upfront if there is any issue with the property, as is compliant with the land registry, with the floor plans and everything, with the documents. See if there is any title on the property. That's just what you have already said. Check up front taxes and costs. How much will it cost that property, whether it's 1% or 10% and everything. So what are if I said everything, then eventually at the end I will try to do a whole recap. And what else can we do up front?
So there is the keystone of the whole quickening the signing process is payment, because obviously the main fear people have, along with time and effort and everything else, there is the money commitment and the liability that they might be exposed. So we talked about conditions and contingencies. So in the past, as we said, it was much easier to take your time and do your own homework. And then when you are fully satisfied, you sign the purchase offer, pay the deposit, and then go to completion. Now, how do you sign a purchase offer, pay the deposit, and then if something goes wrong and the conditions are not met, what happens to the deposit? So that is the keystone, the deposit that you put down, 10%.
Sorry, Nick, to interrupt you, but we have to remind that the formal offer in Italy is binding once you make a purchase offer and the seller signs it, then you must go to the deed.
Correct. So
You have
yes,
to remind that.
yes,
Because it's not everywhere like that. In Italy, it's like that.
it is. Yeah, once the purchase offer is accepted, it is a mutually binding contract. Absolutely. So it is extremely important to have very specific contingency clauses if you are not 100% sure that you are fully committed to buy the property without hesitation. So if there are contingencies, however, the contingencies have to be tied up to your entitlement to get your deposit back. However, in Italy, as a difference with respect to other markets, the deposit traditionally is expected to go straight from the buyer to the seller's bank account. So if the contingencies are not met, how do you expect the sellers to refund you the deposit? Well, if you deal with a perfectly respectful and honest seller, there will be no problem. However, if there is an argument over or a dispute over the contingencies, and for example, you might find out that the property is not fully compliant. The seller might say, well, I can fix it. And you might say, well, I don't want you to fix it because I don't have time. I found another property. I want my money back, and you fix it if you want and sell to someone else. Well, in that case, the seller might say, no, let me fix it. It will take 2 weeks, and then become 3 weeks, and then it becomes a month and a half. In the meantime, you feel that you're wasting your time. So you don't want, in a contingency purchase offer, you don't want your deposit to be held in the seller's bank account, because you have way less leverage and very, very little control. And you would have to start a lawsuit and go to court. It would be a nightmare. It would be so time consuming and so expensive. So the keystone I was referring to earlier is, which is the key question for the agent is, will this seller accept that the deposit is held in escrow in the agency account? And not all real estate agents have an escrow account. So as an alternative, the deposit can be held in a notary's escrow account. And as an alternative option, you can just give a check to the agent to be held at the agency and to be released to the seller only after satisfactory check of all the contingencies. So this is crucial. This is very important. So you sign the purchase offer, which is contingent to A, B, and C, and the final contingency is if A, B, and C are satisfactory, then the deposit goes to the seller, and we then go to closing. But
okay. Now, let's say that also it's not always the case. I mean, if you have to put many contingencies, so the more contingencies you have to put in the purchase offer, the more important is not to give directly the money to the seller and to provide this. Of course, if you don't have any contingency, just go straight and the selling is really smooth, then it's not always the case.
Absolutely.
Let's say that. But of course, the more needs you have, the more contingencies you have to put, and the more important it is to do this way, either with a escrow account or a check to the state agent.
Yeah, and since we are talking now after a season of all the super bonus, all the renovation stimulus programs that Italy has offered, there are many properties now that are sold after having been recently remodeled. And because of current rules for remodeling and for tax credit, all the paperwork very likely is completely in order. And so you might find properties for sale that have been just recently remodeled. They're perfect. The title has been checked because of that. The compliance paperwork is all in order because the government, in order to give you tax credit, will check also that. So you might find a property where the agent says, yes, verified, verified, verified. You can go straight to pay the deposit to the seller and go to completion, because really it's a clean deal.
Smooth.
The other situation when that might happen is more frequently with condo when you buy an apartment in an apartment building, because usually they are sold a little bit more frequently, and it is more difficult to add an addition to an apartment, or to do crazy renovation in an apartment rather than a villa, where people get a little bit wild, a little bit more wild with remodeling. But definitely, otherwise, I recommend that the deposit is held by the agent until the conditions are met, or by the notary, who also has an escrow account. And obviously, if you want to be proactive, you don't have to have an Italian bank account in order to issue a check. You can, yeah.
Yes, definitely. That's a thing you should mention.
Yes, because everyone in Italy will expect that you either transfer the funds, as we said, to an agent or notary escrow account, or give a check. And to give a check, they will want an Italian check. And if you don't have an Italian bank account, it's not a big deal. You can open a currency exchange, international money transfer account overseas, if you are outside of the euro area, and you very easily and quickly can transfer funds for better exchange rate than if you use the traditional bank money transfer feature. And so from your phone, from your smartphone, you can transfer funds to the estate agent or the notary, or if you use a lawyer, a law firm, you can transfer to that law firm's escrow account, and they can issue the check for the agent to hold until all contingencies are met.
Okay, and you mentioned also the bank account. We all know that to buy a property in Italy, you must have a fiscal code, the codice fiscale. But at which stage do you have to have that? Because also that can quicken the process.
Yes, definitely. So many people think that in order to sign a purchase offer, in order to sign a purchase offer, you need an Italian tax number, the codice fiscale. So, and technically, you need a codice fiscale for a purchase offer, but not to sign it. Meaning, you can sign a purchase offer without having a codice fiscale. It is not mandatory to have it. However, if that purchase offer gets accepted, as we said, it becomes a binding contract. And at that point, as a binding contract, it is subject to Italian tax registration duties within 20 days. So within 20 days, you have to take it to the tax authorities and register it. And to register it, all the parties listed in that purchase offer, so buyers or seller, have to have an Italian tax ID. So the result is you can sign a purchase offer without having a tax codice fiscale, Italian tax number. However, if the purchase offer gets accepted, you will need to hurry up and get one. And you can get one through the consulate remotely. You can get one in Italy. The real estate agent can help you get one. If you're a lawyer, your lawyer can help you get one. So if you are definitely ready to buy a property, you can just go ahead and get your tax number, because it doesn't imply any tax obligations. So you can have an Italian tax ID and never have to pay any taxes in Italy if you don't buy a property, don't do anything. It's just an identification number. So you might want to line that up to have one less thing to worry when you are in the process of working on all those contingencies and other formalities.
But if you don't have it yet and you find a property that you really like, you can make an offer without having it, and then if it gets accepted, then you can move to. It takes less than 20 days, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there are some consulates that are very fast. Within 3-4 business days, they will give you one. If you go to Italy, you make an appointment, usually within 2 to 3 business days, you can get one. I mean, it is over the counter. Sometimes they give appointments 1 to 2 or 3 business days out. And there are some services that you can find online. They offer anything between like within 9 business days top, you get one. So I would say that you definitely have options.
Okay, we got one question. It's Bernard. In the case of married couple buyers, do both individual, husband, i.e., sorry, husband and wife require the codice fiscale?
So this is Bernard. Thank you so much. That's a very good question. So in order to make the purchase offer quicker, if you're wondering, am I buying with my spouse? Am I buying on my own? For tax purposes, do I want to involve my children? I am an Italian citizen. My spouse is not. How do I need to sign this purchase offer? Oh man, this is going to slow down the signing process. Well, don't worry about any of that, because you can put in the purchase offer another condition, which is very easy, and your agent will know how to do it. You say, I'm signing this purchase offer with the reserving the right to decide before closing who is going to be the buyer on title. So to sign the purchase offer, one person is good. You don't need both spouses to sign the purchase offer. However, if you want to be both spouses on the purchase offer from the get-go in the beginning, then yes, both spouses will have to have a tax ID at the time of the after the purchase offer is accepted for registration purposes. And if both spouses want to be on title, that's absolutely, they need that Italian tax ID. And you only get one tax ID in your life, unless you change your last name or other crazy things happen to your personal vital record. But you get one tax ID. So if you're buying with your wife, you can sign the purchase offer together or on your own, but eventually your wife will need a codice fiscale in order to close and have her name on the title.
Yeah, exactly. So who buys needs the codice fiscale. So if you buy on your own without your, I mean, you're still married, but your wife will not get, or your husband will not get into the title. He doesn't need the codice fiscale. If you both want to be in the title, you both need the codice fiscale. So
correct.
Whoever buys it needs the codice fiscale. So as we discussed, this question also, the things about the formal offer and everything, introduced me to another question. We got different steps in buying a property in Italy. We got the formal offer, we got the preliminary contract, then we got the final deed. The formal offer and the preliminary contract in Italian is offerta and compromesso. They are very, very similar, and they're not really mandatory. You don't have to go through both of them and everything. Can you tell us what's the difference between the formal offer and the preliminary contract, and when it is good to do one or the other or both?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So when you have a purchase offer, we said that when it is accepted, it is a binding legal contract. And basically, a purchase offer that has been accepted has the same exact validity as a preliminary contract, or also called compromesso. Sometimes in a purchase offer, the parties might say, these are the key aspects of the transaction. If this purchase offer is accepted, the parties agree that they will determine also these other terms. For example, the parties might leave certain areas, certain aspect of the transaction without all the details. And they might say, we will meet again and we'll prepare a preliminary purchase contract where we repeat the basic conditions, but also we go more into the details of our arrangements to specify such details. However, sometimes some people feel that they need, after the purchase offer is accepted, that they need to sign a preliminary purchase contract. Well, that's not really necessary unless you have other things to say. And actually, the Italian Supreme Court has said multiple times that if you sign a purchase offer with the commitment to sign a preliminary without specifying why you need to sign another preliminary, that will be basically a preliminary agreement of a preliminary agreement, meaning you are committing to sign a contract to commit to buy a property, and that will make your first purchase offer null, completely invalid, because it is not possible in Italy to commit to commit. It doesn't make sense. There is no, it is not a thing. So if you, however, want to have a basic purchase offer and say, we will meet again and detail all the specifics, you can do that. But there needs to be some added value to that additional preliminary contract in the middle. If you have a very well done, specific and protecting purchase offer, usually you don't need an additional preliminary purchase contract. You can go straight to completion without going through the additional step.
Yeah, that's pretty clear. So if you make the special offer, you don't need to go the compromesso. You might also do the compromesso without doing the offer.
Yes,
technically you can do that as well. I think you can go directly to the deed without either doing the offer or the purchase process, the preliminary contract, if you already agree with the seller.
Yes,
it's not mandatory. Of course, it's not. It doesn't happen usually. I mean, it's not.
Yes, it's
often.
Yeah, it is not that often. Yeah, you're right. And however, what we have seen, sometimes buyers who are in Italy, instead of going and signing the purchase offer, they will meet straight at the notary to sign a preliminary purchase contract. And at that point, if the notary is the one certifying the preliminary purchase contract, the preliminary purchase contract can be also recorded against the title. So, for example, you can have a situation when you are pretty satisfied with everything, and the seller really wants the deposit into the seller's account, and perhaps you're buying a property of 500,000 euros, and the seller wants 150,000 in his bank account, or 100,000 in his bank accounts, and you can say, okay, let's meet at the notary to sign the preliminary purchase contract directly, and you can record the preliminary purchase contract against the title. So even if the seller goes bankrupt or gets a tax lien or a dispute, your money is protected by the equity of that property, and you have security. So that will be an additional option. It is more costly for the buyer and would imply a very lengthy and costly procedure to extract money from the equity, but it would add some protection.
Okay, and what I think is that the offer is convenient if you, let's say, arrive out of the blue for the seller. So the seller wants 100,000 euros, so you want to offer 80,000 euro without even knowing it. The estate agent can go to the seller and say, okay, I got an offer from a potential buyer that offers you 80,000 euro already with the check, already with everything. So the seller can see directly the money in the check and say, yes, okay, I agree with that. For me, it's fine. So it's a quicker way to start the deal with the seller. Instead, whereas the preliminary contract has to be already agreed between the parties.
Yes.
So it takes more time, and it takes more.
It definitely takes more time. If you want to sign something within just a few days, let's say you see the property today and you want to, today is Wednesday, and you want the purchase offer signed by Friday, you can get that done with the purchase offer. Preliminary purchase contract would take more time, because as you said, you need to have both parties agree on all the details. Where a purchase offer, you sign it, you send the money, the seller sees that you are concretely motivated and serious about the transaction, and the seller, once the seller accepts it, then the seller is bound to go with your purchase offer, especially and even if there are contingencies. For example, yesterday I had a consultation with a client who said, what happens if while we review the contingencies, the seller gets another purchase offer for a higher price? So what can the seller just give us the money back and go with someone else and we lose our property? So that is the very important thing is that in the purchase offer, you specify what type of deposit you are putting down. Because in Italy, the deposit can be qualified under several ways. One way is a conto, like retainer. The other way is a penalty deposit. The other way is a penalty confirmatory deposit. And in Italian would be caparra confirmatoria. This is the strongest one and gives the buyer the largest or the most opportunities in terms of remedies should the seller decide not to comply. So you put down you sign your purchase offer, you put down a deposit in the hands of an agent or to the seller or in escrow, and you put some contingencies. And after 3 weeks, the seller says, you know what, I got a purchase offer for 10% more, I'm selling to someone else. You say, you cannot do that because the deposit was specified to be a confirmatory deposit. So you as the buyer can put a lien against the property, go to the judge and ask the judge to transfer you the property if you are happy with that, with all the contingencies, and the judge will get the purchase price and assign you the property. Or as an alternative, you can ask the seller, okay, you can sell to someone else, but you owe me twice as much the deposit. So you as the buyer have options. And so that type of deposit qualification is called caparra confirmatoria. And you can find it usually in most purchase offers. I would say that it is the default agents will use to make the agreement binding and enforceable.
Of course, it's on the interest too of the estate agent.
Yes, of course. And so if you are not using a real estate agent, make sure that in your purchase offer to the seller, you qualify the deposit as a caparra confirmatoria, because that will give you several options. And once again, one option is to get your deposit back, the double deposit back. The other one is to put a lien on the property, go to the judge and ask the property transfer. And the other option is, I invested way more than what I put down as a deposit. So I suffered severe expenses because in the meantime, I paid for the compliance report, for the title insurance, for this and that. So I had put down 5,000 deposit, but I spent 20,000 for all that. So I want 20,000 refund. And you can do also that when you have qualified your deposit properly.
Okay, clear. We got a few minutes left to answer a few questions.
Sure.
And we got a lot of questions here, people.
Oh, I'm afraid we might have lost Simone. Let's see if he comes back.
Okay.
Where is he? Okay. Okay,
I was saying, if we don't have the time to answer all the questions, keep writing them. Don't worry, because we will reply in the comments, and also if the live stream has ended. So I got one question here. Is would you recommend against semi-detached? Looked at one but needs a new roof. What if the owner or the other parts are not want to go along with getting a new roof? So if I understand, there is a whole building, it's split in two and needs a new roof. I want to fix my roof. What if the other part doesn't want to?
Definitely a big contingency in the signing purchase offer, meaning depending on the structure of the place, you might be able to fix your section of the roof and leave the other part,
Yeah, exactly.
or
Might be the
you might
case.
not be able to do that. You might need to do the whole thing. And as a contingency, you may say, I want to approach the other owners and get their approval over a roof replacement before I go ahead with the purchase. Or you use it as a negotiation tool. They say, listen, there's this potential issue. So either we resolve it before closing, or I would like a small price reduction because of the additional costs and issues I might have.
Okay, another question is this one. What's different between a notary and commercialista, and do we need both?
So in order to buy a property, you'd never need a commercialista in a standard transaction. I don't see how. I mean, yeah, and they might have, they definitely have some competence in the legal implication of a property purchase, but they are usually not involved in a property purchase. Commercialista will be definitely useful if you wanted to rent the property as an Airbnb. They can help you with all the taxes involved, and even with the setting up your Airbnb license and settling the tourist tax and the filing of the guest's passport with the police portal. All of that, commercialista, who are basically accountants. So commercialista are accountants, so a chartered accountant or CPAs, whatever you want to call it, but they are certified accountants. So everything to do with taxes, and they would definitely be able to help you. Whereas the notary, depending where John Coleman is asking this question from, the notary in Italy is a legal professional who has gone through law school, and after an extremely competitive, difficult exam, they are licensed by the government to represent the government in Italian real estate transaction. So they do not represent really the buyer or the seller. They represent the government and check that the transaction is formally compliant with the basic.
Sorry. He says that it's from UK.
Oh, from UK. Perfect. So in the UK, you were referred to commercialista as a chartered accountant probably, whereas the notary in the UK is usually licensed only to certify identities, and is not necessarily doesn't have a law degree or legal background. In Italy, a notary, as I was saying, is a very highly skilled legal professional who represent the government, almost like a judge, but for different functions on behalf of the government. So a notary in Italy acts as a solicitor would in the UK in conveyancing, or for the US viewers of the streaming, a notary in Italy would be the person running a title company in the US. So the notary will run all the formalities and paperwork necessary for completion, and will verify the identity of the parties. Will do title checks, will collect the taxes from the buyer and make the tax payments to the government for the transfer. So you usually don't. I've never seen a commercialista being involved in a property purchase. Obviously, you need necessarily a notary, because you need a notary certification on any transfer of real estate rights.
Definitely. So you must go through the notary.
You must go through the notary.
You don't have to go through a commercialista.
Exactly. And here is the other key for a strategically quick process. If you can identify a notary who speaks English, that would be fantastic, because that is not always easy. But if you can find a notary who speaks English, that would be very helpful in assessing with the notary answering certain questions that otherwise real estate agents might struggle, like, do I buy this in my name or with my spouse, my children? What are the legal implications? Obviously, you can always have a lawyer to assist you with all that, but it's not required by the law. And depending on your circumstances, if you are, especially if you're in Italy, if you can manage to speak Italian, you might hire a notary earlier on and get the notary on your side instead of waiting for closing.
Okay, let's go to the last question. Is this one? Is there any possibility to have a pre-approved loan and the loan amount before making a purchase offer? Obviously, after sending all documents required by the bank.
That is a fantastic question. Thank you, Armando. So yes, especially in a seller's market where we are now, if you go and sign a purchase offer saying this is contingent to mortgage, a seller might be more prone to go with someone who has the cash. So many banks will not give you a mortgage approval unless you have an accepted purchase offer. So it's kind of a vicious cycle, right? Like you say, okay, so the seller will not give me, the bank will not give me the approval until I have the signed purchase offer. And the seller will not sign the purchase offer unless I'm approved. So how do I get out of this? Well, there are some banks that will issue a pre-approval. So exactly what Armando is saying here, how do you get a pre-approval? Because as many might know, the mortgage process goes through mainly 3 checks. One is the check on the solvency and the ability to repay the loan. So the first check is on the individual, on the borrower. The second check is on the property compliance and title, and the third is on the property value. So before looking at compliance and value, the bank will check the person. So you can go to some banks and say, will you give me a pre-approval so that I can sign a purchase offer and give the seller the evidence that I have been pre-approved? So yes, the purchase offer is contingent to mortgage approval, but it will not be on me, the mortgage approval, because I've already been approved. It will be on the property. So if the property is fit to get the loan, we will go to sale. So if the seller is confident that the property is fine, is compliant, and it is not highly overpriced, at least, the transaction will go through, and the seller will be prone to accept a signed purchase offer backed up by a pre-approval.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. We run out of time, of course, more than 1 hour of live stream, and I hope you people enjoyed it. And of course, keep asking your question. I think Nick will be happy to reply right in the comments, and either later on the next days. So keep asking your questions, and thank you very much for attending this live stream. We hope it's been very informative, full of information for you. And see you to the next live stream. And keep using Gate-Away.com to find your properties, and see our blog, read our blogs and everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, Nick. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.